Hi there, it's Stephen Abatiell. As we come out of winter, the energy of spring starts flowing again in our forests. Cold nights and warm days don't just mean muddy roads, they mean the sap's flowing again and it's sugar season. All over the state, folks are boiling in outdoor kettles, homemade evaporators, and sugar houses. In celebration of the season, we're putting out this Sugaring in Vermont episode from our archive. The episode features a lot of folks from a story gathering we hosted in 2019, including Grace Korzun. Grace passed away this past October, and we'd like to dedicate this episode re-release in her memory. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. Welcome to Root Words, a podcast that explores agriculture and cooking's role in connecting us to our landscape and our communities. I'm Stephen Abatiell. Root Words is a collaboration between Vermont Farmers Food Center, Shrewsbury Agricultural Education and Arts Foundation, and many other community members. The project began in 2017 and was made possible by support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as from this community. Throughout this podcast, you're going to be hearing stories from people around the Rutland County region in the heart of Vermont, a region rich in agriculture, family farms, a region that's a pastoral working landscape. These stories are going to be each little windows into what a regional food system really looks like on the community level. We're excited to introduce you to some passionate folks working with the land and with food and bringing communities together. So please pull up a chair and enjoy. In this episode, we explore the tree that connects so many of us to place and community, the sugar maple. We'll meet farmer Greg Cox to learn a little bit about how the modern maple industry has been shaped. Then we'll meet Jessee Lawyer, an Abnaki chef who's connecting with indigenous foodways. Then later, Grace Brigham hosts a community's Stories from the Sugar Bush. So we are back this episode with Kara Fitzbeauchamp of Evening Song Farms. How's it going, Kara?
It's great.
And we have maybe the most Vermonty episode potentially ahead of us here. We're gonna be learning a bit more, hearing a bit more about sugaring.
Ooh, that's a big run there, huh, Sean? Yep.
Have you ever been to Terry's
Sugar House?
Yeah, house
totally.
Party?
It's delightful.
Oh my gosh.
It's a highlight. Actually, it's one of the first parties we went to when we moved here.
Music playing all night. You keep the fire going. He does all the evaporating. He cooks it down all at once in one party.
Yep, hold on. Here, Sean, let me do this. Just let me do this.
What I liked was taking the little cup and dipping it into the evaporator of this kind of half syrup, it's not all the way there, so it's still kind of drinkable, and it's like a warm mapley tea.
That was quick. That was a lot came off. See, that's what happens. Now we're making some real dark, and then it'll slow
People are playing on the porch, and man, it's just a good old Vermont time.
Oh, we gotta stoke up the fire. Yeah, nothing's going on
here. Terry, how long you guys been boiling today?
10 o'clock.
What time is it now?
8:30, isn't it? Is it? 8:30?
And on 10 hours?
10 hours. I think we made a gallon and a half. Well, no, that was the whole gallon. 2.5 gallons.
How long you been doing it this way in the sugar house?
Well, this is new because it's broken, so we're doing it. This isn't normal. We're shoveling it like crazy because we had a few things break, but 93.
93.
Yeah.
How much do you usually make each year?
Right around 20 gallons. Okay, Sean, you can open that valve over there.
When I used to collect via buckets, I would make sap lemonade for the start of the morning. I would go out with a ball jar with just a little bit of squeezed lemons in it and then pour my first thing of sap into my lemon and then use that for the rest of the morning, and that was a real treat.
And a real seasonal treat.
A real seasonal
I
treat.
like having those things that center you in a season. You know,
Totally.
we have seasons here, and not everybody does.
Yeah.
And they have these wonderful little things that might only last a week or 2 weeks. You know, the sap's only flowing. This year, I mean, the sap only flowed for about 4 days, it seemed like.
It was very short.
Yeah, nature centering us in our place.
Mm-hmm.
When I was researching, when I was reading a little bit about sugaring for Rootwords for this project, obviously, or maybe not obvious to folks, European immigrants did not invent sugaring, didn't create it here in this space. It has been done for many generations, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of years before European settlement to this area. And the oldest written record from a European settler of sugaring happening was up, I believe it was in the upper Midwest area. Mm-hmm. And what they had seen was native people there icing the sap. So they had these flat like, you know, bark or wooden containers, and it was, you know, very cold out that time of year in the spring, and they were icing it in these shallow containers, which is now part of the process again in many places, that there's icing, or, you know, similar to the osmosis kind of piece. But I thought it just, like, reading it, like, oh yeah, like, obviously that was an easier way to do it without having to, you know, you can boil in baskets and things if if you take good care of it.
Sure.
But it just made so much sense to make a sweeter product, to make something sweet, a sweet drink, by just icing off the water to it. So I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Cool how it's developed over the years for many people, many different people, different communities. Over the course of Root Words, we're going to hear from a number of different farmers about their perspectives of agriculture in this region, sometimes giving us some of the historical context. And Greg Cox of Boardman Hill Farm in West Rutland is somebody you're going to hear a lot from. But today we've got Greg giving us some perspective on how we have the maple syrup industry here in Vermont that we have today.
Well, when you say Vermont maple syrup, every image that conjures up in your head is because of Bill Clark. Bill Clark took over the Vermont Maple Association as president, was on the board for a long time, and but he became president, I believe, in 1969. It might have been 1970. He ran that organization for 32 years, and in the early 70s, the bottom was dropping out of maple. And Bill Clark turned that organization around. He created the Institute of Maple, the International Institute of Maple Syrup, and he works with Canada, some of the largest retailers and corporations dealing with maple, and he was president of that organization for 1 2-year term. Bill embraced all the changes that came into maple, from tubing to reverse osmosis. Even as an old-timer, when people tend to resist change, Bill embraced change. He and his Maple House in Wells, which at one point was the largest evaporator in the state, started open house there, which now every spring, Maple open house, all the sugar houses. That's Bill Clark. The man was so innovative and creative and had the vision to see what was needed. And he marketed maple to make it what it is today. He was responsible for that brand. An amazing individual.
I feel like so many of our ag discussions are through the European lens, and not, just the way he centered Bill, who is tremendously important and done so much. I was just like, whoa, but this is so relatively recent. You know what I mean? Yeah. What shoulders is this process standing on? Where did we adapt it from? Where did we learn it from? Those are a lot of fun things to explore.
Those are fun things to explore. And to do that, I tracked down Jessee Lawyer, a chef based in Burlington, Vermont, and someone who we hope to have back to this show many times. But thanks for joining us today. Could you just start by introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is Jessee Lawyer. I'm an enrolled citizen with the Abenaki Nation at Missisquoi. I am the executive chef at Sweetwater's American Bistro in Burlington, Vermont on Church Street. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Father hunter, food sovereignty activist. I work with Chief Don and the Abenaki Land Link Project, and I've been developing recipes for the Abenaki people using our cultivars and wild game and a number of various forage items to bring delicious and healthy meals to the community using our traditional landscape.
Yeah, you told me a little bit the other day about your experimental archaeology kind of personal project with maple. Could you just describe that, or talk about your experience with that, and just describe what you did there?
So the first thing I did was I have a large growth of sumac by my house, and I don't know, a couple of years ago I cut down some nice lengths of branches and I started making maple spiles with the hopes to tap the maple trees behind my house in a traditional manner, and that kind of got put on hold with other projects. And then this year, again, still in pandemic and thinking about providing for myself, I wanted to make my own syrup. And so I started thinking about trying it the traditional way, using no seam birch buckets to collect sap, and cutting holes in the tree with an axe and tapping it with either the sumac spiles or little maple shims to collect the sap and put it into the bucket, and then boiling it over a fire. It's a very specific birch bark thickness, and I was told it's from the gray birch that you need to make the no seam buckets, so that way your sap bucket doesn't leak. So that's this year's project, is to collect enough buckets for maybe like 10 trees, or collect enough birch bark to make buckets for about 10 trees. And hopefully by next sugaring season, I'll be able to, just to try it out. I usually, like in anything I do, whether it's art or cooking, I like to do things by hand first or in the traditional way, just to really get a feel for whatever I'm doing. Not that I'll continue to tap birch trees the traditional way, but it's just nice to know where that came from in the beginning and that you can in fact do it. I just feel it's closer to any project I do to do it the hardest way first, I guess. I think it would bring me closer to what I'm doing, kind of walking in my ancestors' footsteps, to see what they had to go through, and not that I have to suffer today and put more work into it than I have to, but it's nice to be able to see what our ancestors had to go through for a meal. And at times, during the spring months and into the summer, that the maple sugar that was produced, because there wasn't a lot of sap or a lot of maple syrup that was produced. It was boiled down to past the point of syrup into sugar packed in birch bark cones. And, that sustained, energy stores in your body for quite a while after that. So it was a lot of work, to get that little bit of sugar. I just think maple makes everything taste better. I use it at home. I use both syrup and sugar in the restaurant. Any time that I can use syrup or maple sugar instead of, processed granulated white sugar, I will. I think the flavor is so much better. It's so much better for your body. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I just love maple.
When family and friends come together in the forest and in the sugar house each spring, they get connected not only to the seasonality and to their landscape, but also to each other, and a lot of stories become the stuff of local legend. So now we'll take you to Shrewsbury's Russellville Schoolhouse for some stories from the sugar bush.
Nobody's listening. No. So, welcome. It's wonderful that so many people came. We even have, is it the Allens from all the way up in Florence?
No, Allen Mills.
Allen Mills.
Yes.
Clear up to Florence they came down, and that's because they saw the ad in the paper. And then all the rest of us are locals or Rutland people, and I think we ought to probably introduce ourselves.
We should go around.
Yeah, maybe we could do that first.
I'm not going to get up. I'm B.J. Stewart.
Right. And do you want to say anything about the Stewart Maple Empire?
Yeah, Maple Empire, that's great.
My son and grandson have got a good operation going in Cuttingsville. And they're all welcome to come and look at it at any time.
About how many taps?
Somewhere around 30,000.
I'm Al Ribbon. I'm down in the village. And we've sugared pretty much ever since the residents have been there in the village. And to my knowledge, there's been 4 sugar houses. When I was a kid, it was always 1,000 buckets. And where we tapped in, those trees have been all logged off.
We make darker syrup than most people because of the innovations that are, the way our pans are set up and the way we boil. And so we tried to find a market for the darker syrup, and the fudge seemed like a good way to, turn it into something that would sell. And that kind of took off.
Could you tell us a little bit about your fame in the New York Times?
That was a long time ago.
But it's still worth telling.
Sometime in the late 90s, the food editor for the New York Times somehow got a hold of some of our fudge. I think she has a summer home in Vermont or something, and she got it somewhere. And so I get a call, and she says, well, I just wanted to verify your address and everything, because you're going to be in my article next week. And I thought, oh.
I'm Lisa, and I work at Dawnland Ranch with Doug here. And he's in charge of sugaring, and I just help him out, and I do whatever he tells me to do. I never question anything. He's really docile.
Yeah. We never come to a head at all. I'm just Doug here, and I work at Spring Lake too. I've been there about 20 years, and the way we've sugared has changed a little, but not too much. We try to keep a lot of hands busy, and in that effort, it also means that we try to stay simple. And we do put a lot of buckets up still, because we can collect with 20, 25 hands working with us. So this year we had about 1,300 buckets up. Sometimes we do nearly 1,800, and then we've got another 1,500 on tubing. And this interests some people. Recently converted from a vacuum system back to gravity. So there's a little backtracking, not the normal trajectory that you hear about in sugaring, but for our program, actually potentially better. I think that the more we were trying to keep on top of our gauges and make sure our water cooling tank was still getting its feed, that the machine was working, we were distracted from working with people, and so those little finicky things, I think they do kind of add up, and we have a few people that have the knowledge to do the fixes, but those people then are drawn out of roles that they could play in other ways that are more people based. So we're kind of taking a step backward, but it's kind of forward in its own way for the kind of operation we run.
So for people from away, Spring Lake Ranch is a therapeutic community, and so one of the theories, or not the theories, but the purposes of the place is to have people get out in the fresh air and work with other people and get physically tired and have good food to eat. Does anybody else want to add to that? But it's so interesting to think that you've stepped back to more hand work instead of forward to more technology.
And syrup has it exists to serve our program, so
yeah.
it needs to fit the feel of the people as less than the product.
I grew up the other side of Syracuse near the snow belt. So we sugared there. We sugared with horses and sleigh. I remember my father blowing with wood. and two big gray Belgians used to gather sap with. I'd be sat on top and bob along with that. I can remember that.
I'm Terry Martin. I live in Russellville, right here on the corner. I started sugaring in Michigan. My dad, all my siblings and us would hang bags on trees and boil in milk jugs.
Well, I'm Grace Korzun. My maple sugaring career goes back probably further than any of yours. I think Dad inherited the maple operation when he moved down to the farm in '37. My earliest memories are when I think I was 3. We had a team of horses, and it was pretty much a one-man operation. The horses were voice controlled. They knew how to go from one spot to the other while he gathered. And I can remember I had a gallon's paint bucket I was supposed to help him with. And I can remember getting off that sap sled and the snow being so deep that I went right out of sight. That was pretty much the end of that operation. That's the time I stayed on the sled. It was a great operation for kids. I guess nowadays you don't let 3 and 4-year-olds hang out in the sugar house, but we did all the time.
My name is Alan Mills. First off, my father was talked into sugaring by my grandfather and my father's hired man. My father didn't like the sugar. In fact, he didn't like maple syrup. And he loved pancakes, but he had to have, Mrs. Butterworth. But he wouldn't put maple syrup on there. And then about it was in the probably early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, my uncle talked him into sugaring. So, first off, my uncle was very meticulous about the sugaring operation. He wanted to be involved in the tapping because you had to do it just right, what you have to do, drill a hole, stick a pipe in there and that works, There's nothing to do. Oh, no. Well, we got to this one tree, it was kind of by the old farm spring. And so it was a huge maple, but I knew that it was pretty much hollow because you could see, the squirrels would be going in and out of the dead part of the tree. So I said to him, he said, well, let's tap that one. I said, well, you won't get anything out of that tree. You'll just get squirrel pee out of that. And he said, oh, no, that'll run, It was a huge maple. Later on in the season, he wanted to help me. So I said, do you want me to go over and get the squirrel pee out of that tree? He said, yes. He said, gather the sap from that one. So it would run kind of a brownish looking sap, So I was delighted when I saw that. He was with me, So I brought the bucket over to the trailer where my uncle was, and I said, what do you want me to do with the squirrel pee? Pour it right here? No, he said, dump it on the ground. But anyway, that's my sugaring story.
I think we should give a hand to all these wonderful stories. Please tell more stories to each other and to all of us, and do sample some of the syrup that we have here.
Grace Brigham, thank you for coming, and try the syrup on your way out. That was a lovely, just real nice small community gathering we got to have out here, and I know I learned a lot from that conversation.
I love hearing my neighbors talk about their connection with maple sugar.
Yeah, and it's just it's one of those things. It's a particular way of understanding the place that you live.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to close out this episode with Jessee Lawyer's final thoughts on maple.
So, growing up, I grew up in Richford, Vermont, and besides the dairy industry, like the next biggest thing is the maple industry. Like, we just have maple farms everywhere. So, you know, and that's not from an indigenous perspective. I don't think where I'm from there was a single indigenous maker of maple syrup, but growing up and just being around that, and, you know, not that I did a lot of work in the sugar woods, but I did help collect sap, and it's a connection to my childhood. And, you know, I always knew that our ancestors used sugar woods and, you know, made that, but it wasn't until older and researching it and talking to elders that, you know, I realized this was, you know, our technology back in the day. And it just kind of shifted, you know, into huge sugaring operations. And, you know, for me, I'd like to see that come back to the community. I know the Nullhegan band they have a patch of sugar woods that they work and bottle and sell. And I want to see more of that. I mean, it's just another way to connect to our culture. You know, it was a huge part of who we were and who we still are. Just like, just like growing, you know, corn, beans, or squash. You know, these are things that sustain our people, you know, over hundreds and thousands of years. And I'd like to see us get back to a place where we can, you know, sustain ourselves again and not have to worry about the dollar to go to the store to buy something. You know, if we can, as a community, as a whole, you know, take part in the process of sugaring and share with the community, I mean, that would just light up my life, you know?
This episode of Root Words was produced by Stephen Abatiell and Kara Fitzbeauchamp with special guest Jessee Lawyer. Special thanks this week to Greg Cox, Grace Brigham, the people of Shrewsbury, and Bill Clark, in humble remembrance for all he did for Vermont's agricultural community. If you'd like to learn more about Indigenous food sovereignty or just get some inspiration for the kitchen, you can follow Jessee Lawyer at the Dawnland Kitchen on Instagram. Our musical themes are by the Salt Ash Serenaders. We are a project of the Vermont Farmers Food Center and SAGE. Thank you all for listening and for being a part of our local food system. We'll catch you next time on Root Words.